Good evening. From celebration to extreme concern, the end of Bashar al-Assad's rule in Syria has ignited a range of international reactions. While world leaders take steps to shore up security concerns and reset diplomatic strategies in the region, the people of Syria embark on a new era. But who wins and who loses from this transformation, and what will it really take to rebuild a nation? Well, on Newshour tonight, we speak to experts on the subject to shine a light on what happens next. But first, Kate Fisher has the very latest from Washington, D.C.
Well, it looks like President-elect Donald Trump will begin his second term in the White House with a potentially even more treacherous situation in the Middle East, certainly an unpredictable one. And he acknowledged that kind of at the weekend when he was in France meeting French President Emmanuel Macron, saying, certainly it seems like the world is going a little crazy right now. He also took to social media to comment on events, saying that the ousting of President of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, had come about because Russia, one of his key allies, had abandoned him, and Trump saying that was because Russia was concentrated on the war in Ukraine, a war he said should never have begun. And he also said that another key ally, Iran, had not been able to support former President Assad because of Israel's successful military operations in the Middle East. But now he has to decide how he is going to deal with this when he becomes president. He spent much time on the campaign trail saying he wanted to withdraw the US from global engagement, putting America first. And he now, though, must decide whether he's content to let that continue with Syria, because there is, of course, potential for other US adversaries to take advantage in the vacuum of power. The leading rebel group that successfully ousted Bashar al-Assad is led by an organisation that the US views as a terrorist organisation. Already, Joe Biden, the current US president, has deployed airstrikes against ISIS in Syria off the back of the downfall of the Assad regime. And now Donald Trump is going to have to decide if he will continue that. There are 900 US troops based in Syria who will have been carrying out raids like that one. And Donald Trump will need to decide if he needs to continue that deployment or withdraw those troops, as he suggested in the past he would like to do. Also, the US has sanctions on Syria. Will Donald Trump continue to implement them, or will he bring them out? These are all decisions that he will have to make and decide whether he will go back on those promises he made on the campaign to withdraw the US from messy Middle Eastern conflicts. It could be that although it could be a task that is easier said than done, given the speed of which things have changed in the Middle East in just the last 24 hours or so. Kate Fisher for A News in Washington, D.C.
Well, Russia is another key player in the region and the destination of the outgoing former Syrian leader. Dasha Chernyshova reports for us now with the latest updates from Moscow.
Guy, the Kremlin has confirmed that Russia has granted political asylum to Bashar Assad and his family, but Russia has so far refused to confirm his whereabouts. Earlier, the Russian Foreign Ministry said Bashar Assad has resigned as Syrian president after talks with the military opposition and left the country. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov on Monday said that President Vladimir Putin's official schedule does not include a meeting with Bashar Assad. He added that the events in Syria had surprised the entire world and that Moscow is no exception. Peskov stressed that the situation in the country is volatile and it is too early to talk about Russia's remaining military presence in Syria. He said that would be a subject of discussions with the new authorities. Meanwhile, Moscow says the Russian military in Syria are doing everything necessary to ensure the security of military bases. The Kremlin spokesman said that security of Russian military bases in Syria is a very important issue. A senior Russian lawmaker said Monday that Russia would respond harshly if those facilities are attacked. attacked. The head of Russia's State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, emphasized that there are no problematic issues there. Security is fully ensured, he said. The Kremlin also insisted on not coming to hasty conclusions on the situation with the release of prisoners in Syria, saying that all cases should be considered separately. Moscow also believes that the Astana process, which is the trilateral initiative involving Russia, Turkey and Iran, is always relevant as a mechanism for exchanging opinions, and says it hopes the talks will continue. So it is clear Russia is determined to maintain a dialogue on Syria, analyze the situation and hold consultations. Meanwhile, a new flag has been installed at the Syrian embassy in Moscow, with operations going on as normal according to the mission there. And Russian media reports say the Syrian opposition has provided security guarantees to the Russian diplomatic mission in Damascus. Moscow says the international situation is very turbulent, and this requires special attention, including from the Russian authorities. Dasha Cherdeshova in Moscow for A News.
Well, from cautious optimism to mobilising strategic weapon systems to secure their border, the reaction of Israel so far has been nuanced. A News's Trent Murray sent this report earlier from the border between Israel and Syria.
We might be able to see just off in the distance here a number of buildings. Now, these are buildings that were sitting in the demilitarised zone between Israel and Syria. This is a DMZ which has been standing since 1974 at the end of the Yom Kippur War. But what we have seen in the past 36 hours is Israel act with enormous speed. The IDF occupying now that entire DMZ as a result of the Syrian troops that were on the other side of it abandoning their posts over the weekend with the fall of the Bashar al-Assad government. The IDF has now released footage of their troops operating inside of Syrian territory, at one point even 10 kilometres away from the border. Now, the official reason from the government of Israel is that they are doing this in order to protect the state of Israel. They have seen what has happened in Syria. They are concerned about security and safety and the state of almost lawlessness which appears to be in Syria right now. So they say they are sending troops and tanks in order to protect the state. But some analysts in this region have openly begun to question whether this is a permanent move by the Israelis, effectively using the calamity of what's happening in Syria to try and claim more territory in the contested area of the Golan Heights. We have had an official explanation as well from Israel's foreign minister, who has spoken about a number of airstrikes which have taken place in the past 24 hours. The IDF has now confirmed that they were behind those strikes. This statement says that our interest is the security of the state of Israel and its citizens. That is why we attacked strategic weapons networks, residual chemical weapons capabilities, long-range missiles and rockets, so that they do not fall into the hands of extremist elements. Trent Murray for A News at the Israel-Syria border.
Dr. Enes Bayrakli is the head of the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the Turkish-German University. I asked him for his assessment of the winners and losers resulting from the end of the Assad rule in Syria and what it will take in real terms to rebuild society.
There are also other losers, but these are the two important ones. Of course, the biggest loser, one don't need to mention, is the Assad regime and Baath party, and its rule in Syria has ended. It was a very cruel regime, tyrannical. One can say that Turkey became victorious in Syria. Turkey has paid a huge, price for in Syria. Turkey has lost its soldiers in Syria. Of course, it will be difficult, especially after such a horrible civil war and atrocities. It is already difficult to, build a political system from scratch and after a revolution. But I think there is a will in Syria and the people are, I think, it wasn't horror, it was a nightmare, and they just woken up. And I think they all realized the true value of this. And there's a sincere will in Syria, I think, to build a functioning political system. And of course, Turkey will be supporting this. Turkey has now huge experience in Syria, and Turkey has huge experience, of course, has a functioning democratic system. And I think Turkey can help to build this system in Syria. It will take time, but I think they will succeed because they have seen also, and I think the signs coming from the opposition, from different factions, actually, from Syria, that they have learned from their past mistakes. And that's why I think Assad regime has collapsed also so quickly.
Well, as the world prepares itself for a Trump presidency, let's speak now to our Washington analyst, Obey Shabandar, to understand how the US administration might deal with a new Syria. Obey, always a pleasure to speak to you. Let's understand then, how do you think the new Trump administration is going to want to approach this situation with Syria?
Well, after a lightning blitz in 12 days, Syrian rebels have managed to capture the capital of Damascus, overthrow the regime of Bashar al-Assad, and now it is a new dawn for the people of Syria. And this is a major policy concern for Washington because the Americans still have perhaps around 2,000 troops based in eastern Syria. The question is, what will the incoming Trump administration, how will they treat America's approach with Syria? Will Washington, under a Trump administration, reconsider the logic and the justification of having a U.S. ground troop presence in the eastern Syria desert? We did see some indications on how President Trump views Syria in a couple of social media posts that he posted just prior to the collapse of the Bashar al-Assad regime. And one of them, and I quote here, President Trump said that Assad is gone, he has fled his country, his protector Russia was not interested in protecting him any longer, and that the U.S. should not get involved in what President Trump called the mess in Syria. So on one hand, you have President Trump essentially saying that, look, Russia should never have been in Syria. It's a mess, and now they're having to leave with their main proxy force essentially having been defeated, and that the U.S. should not repeat those type of mistakes. And this is really in line with President Trump's America First foreign policy. Remember, in 2019, President Trump wanted to withdraw most of the American troops from Syria, but there was pushback from the Pentagon and the then Secretary of Defense. The American mission in Syria is technically to defeat the ISIS terror group, Daesh. But now there are questions on whether the U.S. really needs to be there to do that anymore, given that the Russians have left, the Iranians have left, there's a new government being formed in Damascus, and perhaps Syrian rebel forces who are, as they form their new state and government, can be the ones to take that. Just 24 hours ago, the U.S. Central Command announced that they had launched 100 different airstrikes on the remaining ISIS terrorist positions in the eastern desert. Now, remember, ISIS doesn't control any contiguous territory in Syria, but they are holed up in various caves and hideouts in a very difficult to reach areas in the Syrian desert. And the U.S. really relies more on air power to target these areas that used to be under the zone of control of the Russian Air Force. But it seems now that the Russians are also packing up their remaining military assets in Syria to leave the country following Bashar al-Assad's demise. I think you can certainly expect a serious policy review by the incoming Trump administration on whether or not it makes any strategic sense to keep those soldiers in eastern Syria, and perhaps even that maybe the U.S. can work with new partners in Syria to capture or kill the remaining ISIS terrorists. But that remains the main American concern. They're worried about history repeating itself. What happened in Iraq when most of al-Qaeda in Iraq was killed or captured, but then in 2010, 2011, they managed to escape from Iraqi prisons, and they went on to form the ISIS terror group. So that remains a major concern. And I think that will be a concern also for the incoming Trump administration and his new Middle East team.
So a major policy review expected with the new administration, as you say, Obey. We've heard the language of a future president that intends to be less interventionist. However, what do you expect the new administration to be looking for when it comes to other major actors in this region?
Yeah, certainly. The America First foreign policy, as has been described by President Trump and some of his advisors, is less intervention, that the U.S. should not repeat the mistakes of the Iraq invasion, of the Afghanistan invasion, that it should take a foreign policy blueprint of peace through strength, of deterrence, without nation building, without trying to build new nations from the ground up like the U.S. failed to do in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I think you can expect more cooperation between the Americans and Russia in the Middle East. You saw an indication of that in President Trump's social media post, where he said, look, the Russians should not have been in Syria. And, they're paying the price. And you can expect more American cooperation with its Arab Gulf allies. I think another major policy priority for the Trump administration will be to continue the work of the Abraham Accords. And I think there will really be a focus on trying to get the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia into those Abraham Accords that brought a peace normalization agreement between the Arab Gulf states and the State of Israel.
Well, Obey, thank you as always for your analysis. It's always great to hear from you, and we'll look forward to hearing you again very soon. Obey Shambanda there. And that is all we have time for on this hour tonight. From all of us here on the Newshour team, thank you very much for watching. Do stay with us on A News. And from all of us here, we wish you a very pleasant evening ahead.